I recently posted a podcast interview with Dr. Scott Stevenson. During that conversation, Dr. Scott relayed an anecdote about the bodybuilder Jordan Peters and how Jordan tried out Mike Israetel's style of training and he didn't like the results that he got. I thought the anecdote was interesting, and so I clipped it and posted it as a reel on my Instagram. And by my standards, it went semi-viral. At this point, it's got something like 400,000 views. But I think a lot of people who saw that clip really missed the point. Most people just took it as an opportunity to trash Mike Israetel and his training principles. And that's not what Dr. Scott was saying, and I don't think that's what JP would say either. I'm going to play the clip for you now, and then I'm going to break down what Dr. Scott is saying and explain the differences between Jordan and Mike's training philosophies. Let's dive in. This video is for educational entertainment purposes only.
Jordan Peters, and he made this public so I can talk about this, but he had a conversation with Mike Israetel. Mike explained his logic of training with reps in reserve and the way he goes about doing things, and Jordan said, hey, I'll do whatever it takes to get better. And he tried Mike's perspective out. It didn't work for him. He gave it several months. He felt like he was regressing, so he went back to what's working. And it makes sense to me that it wouldn't work. He wasn't training with as much effort as he was previously, and effort is what got him there.
Let me begin by explaining Mike's training style. Mike's approach is calculated and methodical. Mike has contributed a tremendous amount to the industry. The terms maximal recoverable volume, stimulus to fatigue ratio, these concepts, these paradigms were created and promulgated by Dr. Mike. I understand people take issue with some of his positions, but his contributions to the industry are irrefutable. And if you look at RP's training philosophy, it makes sense. Generally speaking, RP advocates for training with reps in reserve. So you create a mesocycle, you create a training block, and throughout that training block, each week gets harder. So at the beginning of your training block, you might be training at 3 or 4 reps in reserve. And as the weeks progress, you add weight and or reps and get closer and closer to failure. Additionally, RP also tends to advocate for escalations of volume, meaning that as that training block progresses, as you go week to week, RP suggests that you add sets if and when your recovery is keeping pace. It's Mike's assertion that the body adapts to volume, and thus you can keep adding volume in order to spur additional progress. Additionally, Mike advocates for very controlled, robot-like training. He has his own Facebook group called Team Full ROM, and he likes to highlight and showcase trainees that execute their lifts with precision, typically a long, slow eccentric with a pause at the bottom in the stretch position for most movements. Mike's goal with his training, and indeed much of his thinking, is about maximizing stimulus and minimizing fatigue. He's striving to get the most out of each movement while also incurring the smallest fatigue cost. That's his primary motive, and that's his rationale for many of his decisions. Jordan Peters' training is, in a word, different. Jordan prioritizes intensity above all else. He takes all of his sets to muscular failure. He's seeking to get the most out of each set, and he's not as concerned with any fatigue that he's generating as a result. I don't believe that he escalates his training volumes over time, although I wouldn't necessarily say that he trains with low volume either. His training tends to be moderate. Jordan's technique is also impeccable, but I think there's less of an emphasis on the eccentric and the pause and more of an emphasis on controlled ferocity, controlled strength and aggression. That really, to me, is Jordan Peters' training philosophy in a sentence. It is controlled destruction. That's what Jordan Peters seeks to do, and that's how he spurs and drives progress within his own training. So, which approach is better? Should you train with crazy intensity and moderate volumes? Should you train like a robot and seek to calculate your RIRs with precision? Well, the truth is, either option is valid, and both options have netted thousands upon thousands of people excellent results. Both approaches are totally valid. Essentially, what both lifters, what both thinkers are trying to do is balance the various training variables that are at play. Because intensity is higher for Jordan Peters, his volume has to be lower. And in the case of Mike, because his intensity is relatively lower, he's able to drive volume more aggressively. Ultimately, they're seeking to achieve the same outcome, maximal hypertrophy, maximal muscle growth. And in terms of the information we possess right now as coaches, athletes, and practitioners, there's no clear evidence that either approach is superior to the other. So why then, when JP tried Mike's training, did he fail? Why didn't he get the results he was accustomed to? Well, the key here is that training is a skill, and Jordan is incredibly skilled and adept at executing his style of training. I don't know Jordan personally, but listening to him speak, it's clear he is deeply emotionally invested in his training. He revs himself up. He reaches intense states of emotional exaltation when he's lifting. Sometimes he literally weeps before or after a set he performs. And he has honed that skill. He has taught himself how to execute lifts with that level of intensity, and that has spurred his progress. And so when he tried Mike's principles, when he tried to train in this fashion, he wasn't accustomed to doing it. And I think more importantly, it didn't satisfy his own psychological urges. So it was probably difficult from an intellectual perspective, and it also didn't meet his needs as a person. And thus, his results were lackluster. I do think it's conceivable that if he had stuck with RP for a very long time, he might have gotten better at it and figured out ways to make it work for him. But the truth is, why would he do that? He doesn't need to do that. Jordan has already figured out how his body works. I think it's commendable he was willing to try something new, but he doesn't need to throw out what works just for the new, shiny object. And I think that's what Dr. Scott Stevenson was really trying to say in that clip. It's not that intensity is superior. It's not that Jordan's training philosophy is superior. It's that Jordan already has a thing that works for him, a thing that he's good at, a thing that he's trained himself to do and execute at an incredibly high level with incredibly high levels of consistency. And so there's simply no reason for him to try something else. He would have to learn how to get good at that. And he's deep enough into his lifting career that that trade-off really isn't worth it. It isn't worth the time investment, the emotional investment he would need to master a new training paradigm. So the question for you, the viewer, is how should you train? Well, the truth is, it's kind of up to you. If you are new to training, I would encourage you to try a number of different training philosophies and styles. See what makes sense to you. And if you've only been training 6 months or a couple years, feel free to try something new. Even if the thing you're doing is currently working, there may still be things that could work better. You're not far enough down this path that you're locked into place like JP. I also think you should listen to your own psychology, your own internal voice. What is it that drives you? What do you want to feel like when you go to the gym? How do you want to feel after? Do you want to view yourself as a savage that rips heavy weights off the ground? Or do you want to look at yourself like a calculating, cold robot that works with efficiency? You can do either. You can do both. It's up to you and your own sense of self-image. And ultimately, as someone who is a coach who has seen many athletes progress over long periods of time, I can tell you that the most important training variable is consistency. The best training program is the program you'll do, and the longer you do it, the more likely you are to have real results. So if you can find something that gels with you, that makes sense to you, and that allows you to make progress without getting injured, you're winning. And that's true for JP, that's true for Mike, and that's true for me. So listen, don't trash Mike, don't trash JP. Both of them are very successful and have helped tons of people achieve the physiques of their dreams. Yes, they have different visions and different approaches to training, but neither approach is superior or better than the other. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you.